Welcome everybody back to the podcast. This is Warren C. Street Photography Podcast, and want to just give a good rundown on what the podcast is about. Again, we basically talk about everything in and around street photography, period. Whether it's the gear, whether it's trends that are happening. I have a section on who you're repping as far as city-wise and the artists that you're repping in the city. We go through that, and then we have our discussion on Q&A, if there's questions that you have for me that you want to bring to the community, as well as questions I bring to you guys so that you can think about it and then see what you want to provide to the community or back to me as your answers. I can be reached on my Instagram account, Warren C on Instagram, and you can hit me up there with questions you may have from any of the podcasts we've had in the series so far. This is number 4, so I'm happy that I'm actually up to number 4, and hopefully you guys are enjoying the content that I'm putting out on the podcast. As far as the podcast itself is concerned, I have it being played on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Play, and of course on YouTube on my channel, Warren C. You'll see the podcast appear there as well. One of the other things I'd like to point out too is, I'm doing this from the love of my heart. I just enjoy doing this. But if you guys want to support me, you can definitely hit me with buy me a coffee. I have the link in the description for the podcast on YouTube. Before you folks, if you go to buymeacoffee.com and look for Warren C, you'll be able to support me that way as well if you'd like to, and buy me a coffee. So with that, in episode 4 of our podcast, we're going to start off like we normally do in our podcast with the trending item. And for this podcast session, as I look at my notes here and make sure I'm starting this off right, one of the things that I've been noticing a lot lately, and just basically going and looking at YouTube and looking at the people I follow on YouTube, like Thomas Heaton, even following some other individuals that do street photography like myself, I see an overwhelming trend for those YouTubers to talk about passion projects. You don't normally hear too much about passion projects generally on YouTube. You hear about a person maybe looking to do something, looking to start something every once in a while. But as far as YouTube is concerned, it's generally people providing information on stuff gear-wise, paid work, and things like that, at least for what I listen to and what I go after as far as the content I consume on YouTube. And it got me to realizing, as I paid more attention to it over the past few months, that I see a lot of YouTubers mentioning passion projects. So what is a passion project? Well, from what I can tell, from just looking again off of YouTube, not looking up any definitions or anything like that, it's just something that an individual is going to be working on that's not a paid, or they're not doing it for money. They're doing it for a personal pleasure, if you will. Personal project, more, it kind of aligns to me, something that they're passionate about, hopefully, or something that they want to work on to broaden their experience, broaden their skill set. It can even help them even learn more about their gear. But I have seen where there's been an increase of YouTubers talking about passion projects. Don't know if you agree. Let me know in the comment for the YouTube channel. If you're watching this video on YouTube, do you agree, and do you have a passion project? When I think about passion projects, I wonder, in a lot of cases, at least from what I'm seeing, is it a growth thing that you would do one for? You're looking to grow in an area that you're weakest in. I know if I went ahead and did a passion project, that's what I would look at doing, is looking to grow in an area that I'm weak in, become more efficient in it, and be able to increase my skill set when it comes to the type of street photography content that I go after. The other thing I thought about is styling. Are you looking to improve on your style of street photography? Like for me particularly, I do a lot of unobtrusive portrait and sometimes obtrusive photography. And it's nice to be able to work on that, specifically the obtrusive, where I'm interrupting the scene, interrupting what's going on, and asking a person for a portrait project, or interrupting the scene to get a better image out of it. Thus, the intrusive aspect of that type of street photography. It's nice to work on that and get more comfortable with it, build up that skill set of politely and introducing yourself into a scene so that you can get an image more to the way you may want it, particularly with asking a person for a portrait image where I'll actually pose that person and so forth. So is that a way to help me increase my style of street photography, to do a passion project? Introduce that passion project as part of it. For those of you out there who are listening to the podcast and then into photography, do you have passion projects? Specifically when it comes to street. I actually thought about doing a project where I shot black and white film for a month, or maybe I shot only in black and white on my not X Pro, but X100V Fujifilm camera. Right now, if I have to say I'm doing a passion project, based on the most recent video I let out, or one of the most recent videos I let out on the YouTube channel, I actually talked about a second opportunity getting comfortable shooting adapted lenses on my mirrorless cameras. So I consider that a passion project. Does it qualify? You guys let me know. I think it does. Because it's not that I'm doing it for money, but I'm definitely doing it to increase a skill set, which is being able to get more comfortable shooting with manual lenses on my mirrorless camera and seeing what type of images I can create and building up that knowledge set, so when I use it, even for say a paid project, I know what I'm doing. So that leads me to, do you see yourself using passion projects even to enhance your skill set so that you can actually take advantage of it in a paid opportunity? So you guys let me know. Is it trending? Do you think? Is it something you see? I think it is. I see a lot of, again, folks on YouTube, which is the platform that I'm viewing this on, and it come to this understanding that passion projects is definitely trending. But is it too trendy? Is it just something that people are saying on YouTube so that makes you think that they're doing stuff? You guys let me know. Usually when I hear certain folks on there, and whether it's a new channel I'm watching or so forth, where they mention passion projects, I'm wondering if they're just mentioning it because they think it'll help with views. Do you guys think that? For me, I really hope that it's that they're using it to do, like I said, building up a skill set, working on a style of photography that they're doing, and also being able to understand their equipment more by doing certain projects, and going back to one of the things I mentioned on the last episode, which is working with limitations to build up your strengths, right? So there you go. Let me know what you guys think. Is passion projects a trending thing that you see when it comes to photography, particularly in street photography? Are you doing a passion project, and what is it? I'd love to hear from you guys about what it is that you might be doing. When it comes to the next episode or section of the podcast, I thought hard and long on this one, as far as who you're repping, and who I wanted to rep this episode, as far as the type of street photography that I tried to incorporate, if any, in my style, and increase the personalization of my style of street photography. One of the things that I do when I go out and shoot, I do sometimes look at whether I want to shoot based on a documentary style of street photography. Documenting, in a way, a project. I guess I could go back to what we just talked about in the trend, a passion project of documenting something on the street that has more of a moral implication, if you will. And I immediately thought of this particular photographer, and that photographer is Gordon Parks. So Gordon Parks is out of, I think, Chicago. Yes. So we are repping Chicago for this episode with Mr. Gordon Parks. Now, I'll read my little information I have on Mr. Gordon Parks, and then we'll go through his works and so forth, and see what we think about him and what I think about him. Mr. Gordon Parks, Mr. Gordon Roger Alexander Buckingham Parks, now that's a name for you, was an American photographer, composer, author, poet, and film director who became prominent in U.S. documentary photojournalism in the 1940s through 1970s, particularly in issues of civil rights, poverty in African Americans, and in glamour photography. He was born in November 30th of 1912, and unfortunately Mr. Parks is no longer with us, but he lived a very long life, and it looks like it was very productive for him, which is awesome. Now, unlike the last episode, I didn't have a book of the artist that we were representing, which was Gary Winograd, but I do have a book for Mr. Gordon Parks. I've had this book for probably a year now, and I can honestly say with this particular book, which is Gordon Parks' segregation story, I felt this. I felt this a lot. I felt at the time that this book was created and that the images were created depicting the segregation of the normal person, the normal African American at the time in the 70s, and what they went through and how they deal with day-to-day life. Not the, prominent hero figures of the time or political figures of the time, and depicting their, I guess you could say, visualization of segregation and how it went on. But I mean, look at the back of this cover. Look at the little girls staring in the park, looking at the white kids playing, and they're just outside. I mean, this is America, guys. This is American history right here. This was a very powerful experience for me going through this book. And that means a lot. That means these images are very powerful. They journalize a time in American history where things weren't as pleasant for a group of American people, Black Americans, which as obviously I am. And you don't have information readily available to document that because of the fact that it wasn't that great of a time for America, all the way from the time of slavery till it ended up until actually, in some cases, present day. What I like about the book is how he depicted, how he journalized what was in front of him, the story it tells. So powerful that even now when I do go through the pictures and go through the book every once in a while to see the style of shooting that he had, a lot of portrait work, use of colors, but literally documenting life as it happened for the subjects in front of him. I mean, you can't get it any more basic in the definition of journalistic photography. And as far as I'm concerned, it's street photography because it's out in the public in a lot of cases. It may not be in cities that most people are used to visualizing street photography. And as I flip through this book, I mean, literally, Gordon Parks captured life for African Americans during this time of segregation and how they live their lives. It is very powerful, very telling for me. Growing up in a big city like New York, I didn't see this. I wasn't privy to this. So to me, this is just as much as a history book as it is a photo book. And I really, really, really enjoyed the product, the images and content that Gordon Parks captured, and I can actually take a look at and learn from with this book. So what do I take from this? When it comes to wanting to do something that's on a journalistic style of street photography, this has helped me to understand, to make sure I focus on the story that is being told. What am I trying to tell when I'm journalizing what's in front of me with a camera? Am I getting that across in the images? Am I depicting it true to life? So in that instance, would I use color over black and white? In this instance, color for sure. That color, and one of the things I've told people when I've talked to people about why I use black and white versus why I use color, is that color shows emotion, period. if these images in this book were not in color, it would not give you the emotional connection to the level that it gives you. Like a black and white photo would. Black and white photos can be kind of sterile because there's no color. Not that you couldn't draw the emotion out of the picture that was on the left for you guys, or I should say right for you guys, with a young fellow in the cornfield. But the color brings out more of the emotion that's going on in this image. And it taught me that, you know, in doing journalistic style street photography, I should look to choose color to capture the emotion, if there's emotion out there that I'm capturing, and not black and white. And what I would incorporate in using Gordon Parks, style of photography is definitely making sure I'm using the right film or color profile or profile in general of the camera to aid in telling the story. Again, this book is very powerful. Every time I see this book on my shelf and I go through a couple of images, it definitely has a very powerful effect on me because of the time that what folks went through. And I can relate to some of this. I was born in 71 in the city streets of New York. And, you know, as I grew up, we may not have had the segregated white, black type of setup, but we still dealt with segregation, the hidden part of segregation, and whites only and blacks only as the country went through back in those days. Now, this book did a great job of depicting exactly what the normal African American went through. So I commend Mr. Gordon Parks. If it was, again, one of those situations where he was still alive today, where I could have been able to take advantage of learning from him directly with workshops, I would absolutely do it. To know that this person was a director, a poet, and all of these different things in his career, oh my gosh, just trying to, understand what I could have learned based on what I've learned just from going through this one book. Excuse me. Now, with that, I can honestly say, you guys let me know who you're repping. You know, what do you think of Mr. Gordon Parks and his work? What have you learned from viewing his work? And then on top of that, who are you guys repping? Again, let me know who you repping, who you want me to discuss. Look at their works and see how I feel. You tell me based on who you rep and city and the artist, what you feel about their work and how you use that work, if any, or their work, if any, in any way, I should say, to enhance your style of photography, street photography, and so forth. So this session, we're repping Mr. Gordon Parks. I suggest you guys take a look at his work, and you let me know if you agree with what I just said about how his use of color helped in him documenting the effect of segregation on folks in these images that you see, or in his other works, his use of color and documenting his the world, I should say, as it happened in front of him. So there you go. Now, when it comes to gear, I could honestly say this week, I should say this session, compared to the last session, might be a continuation. I mean, in the last session, we talked about adapted lenses. We talked about the rules of composition and how that me adapting a lens to my camera forced me to slow down and think more of the rules of composition for an image. Well, one of the things I want to discuss with today's episode when it comes to gear is format sizes. So street photography, I can honestly be happy with a JPEG image, where it could be a JPEG image from, you know, a 35mm format, an APS-C format, 1-inch sensor. It could be the same sensor that's used on a smartphone. As long as I'm capturing the image that I want to capture at that time, and the camera I'm using is working with me, I can utilize that tool to capture that image. Format size doesn't matter at that point. Format size only matters to me when I want more detail. So let me explain. As we know, the bigger the sensor, the more detail you're going to grab. What helps in you getting even more detail is the megapixels that sensor is working with. So a 40 megapixel sensor on an APS-C camera like the Fujifilm X106 is going to be fantastic compared to a Micro Four Thirds sensor with the same megapixels on it. The bigger the sensor, the more detail and crisp that image is going to be. That there's no getting around that, which is why a 50 megapixel medium format sensor that's on the GFX 50R for me is still going to give me a better image than the 42 megapixel sensor on the Nikon Z8 I have, which is a full frame sensor camera. So it becomes, again, more of an issue for me depending on the detail that I want to capture in my street photography. So when I go out, I don't think about it that much because the APS-C sensors that I use give me all the detail that I need. Heck, from the previous episode, I'm actually doing more JPEG posting and using the JPEG straight out of camera. Now again, with the bigger megapixels, I'm getting bigger JPEG files too that are giving me more detail. The sensor or format size, of the sensor is going to definitely give me the detail I want based on what I want. I can't say what I'm doing because generally going out doing street photography, you may not always want your subject to be in super detail. So when it comes to format sizes, I think gear-wise, it's more of how much detail you actually want to play with. The bigger the sensor, the more detail you get. But in a lot of cases, sometimes like medium format cameras, you slow up. When you get into the realm of large format, 4x5, you're really slowing up because you're using a tripod. But you're going to get some serious detail because that format size is going to give you greater detail. It's a bigger format. So what do you guys do? What do you think is the right format size? Is there one preferred for you over another? I can honestly say for those questions I just asked of the community for the channel is it really depends on the individual, on what they want to deal with, on what they're getting. Is it giving you the image that you want? Is it helping you achieve the quality of image you want for the content that you're going after? If you're an individual that likes to take pictures of cars in motion, you may not care that much about how big the format sensor is, more than you care about will I be able to get the shutter and ISO and so forth at the right settings so I can get my motion blur, right? Do I have enough light to capture the subject the way I want and so forth? So to me, if anybody ever comes to you and says medium format, full frame, ASPC and blah, 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 this, you should have it for this reason or that reason or this reason. As I look at street photography, it doesn't really matter other than are you getting the images that you want to get out of that format size, then that's all that matters. If at some point you realize you want more detail or you want less detail, that will dictate whether you shoot with something that's smaller in size or something that's bigger in size. But with the cameras these days and what they're able to do, you can take a Micro Four Thirds sensor out and you can have a blast with it for years, decades, if at this point, based on what the megapixels these cameras are packing, along with the improved technology and the processors and so forth. I was blown away by what OM systems can do with capturing long duration photos, as I say. They have a setting on their cameras that will allow you to do long duration light trails and continue to add light, and it keeps taking pictures and updating the image itself without you all of a sudden having a bazillion images. I think that's phenomenal, and that's all based on what the processor can do. So you can get more detailed images in that instance than you could do in the past. So does it matter at that point what size your format is for your camera? You know, does it matter if you're shooting full frame? Does it matter if you're shooting medium format? Does it matter if you're shooting 4x5 in that instant? So again, guys, when it comes to gear and you hear the whole debate about full frame versus APS-C versus micro four thirds, full medium format versus full frame. Hey, I got this many megapixels on my full frame camera now, so I don't have to worry about that full frame itch I have. It really comes down to what you want to achieve in your final images, and what does that mean based on the camera that you're using and the technology that it has in it. You know, a lot of Fujifilm cameras, and for that matter, a lot of mirrorless cameras are coming with these crazy focus stacking features built into the camera. You don't even have to go to post-processing software to be able to do some of these stacking options that you can do in camera. So I think as far as I'm concerned with the whole debate on that, it's moot. Go out and shoot. Grab you a camera, learn your gear, learn that tool, and create. And I think that's what's more important, is that we learn the tool that you're using and you learn to create. When you can't create what you want with that tool, then it's time to go ahead and get a new one. Now, I'll tell you guys right now, I've fallen victim to gas, but I am at the point where I do understand that more now than I did before. And so I know that I will go out now with my current tools to create. And I know I know what I'm looking for, because I've used the tools enough to know which one is the right one to bring for what I'm going to go create for, regardless of format size. All right. So Q&A this week. I have a question for you guys when it comes to Q&A, and I thought long and hard about this one. I didn't know if I should bring this to the podcast or not, but I am hoping that it sparks some serious debate with you guys. So, how big of a fan are you? We're gonna say ultra fan. Are you an ultra fan of your brand? Do you own stock in the camera brand that you shoot with? There's my question. And the reason I asked this question is, I was thinking about this the other day, and I've had a buddy talk to me a few years ago, and I actually recently looked at my stock on some things that I have. And one of the pieces of advice I got years ago when I started up a brokerage account just to play with stocks was, hey, you should look at the products and services that you utilize, that you like. See what that company stock is like and buy into it. Because if you like it, there's a good chance that they're doing well and that you are already technically an ambassador of that product. So why wouldn't you invest in that product and get something back, right? And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. I eat Lay's potato chips all the dang time. What's Lay's stock like? Should I be investing in Lay's stock and investing in my future, right? So to all you fanboys out there, how big of a fan are you? Do you invest in the stock of the brand that you shoot? So just for a little tidbit of information here, I'm gonna open up the book and I'm gonna let you guys know right now, as of today, and I'm basing this off of where the stock prices are for four brands, April of 2024. So of course I'm a Fuji shooter, so I'm gonna start off with Fuji. And in April of 2024, Fujifilm stock. Now that's Fujifilm. That doesn't necessarily mean it's just only the camera brand. Fujifilm, just like some of the other camera brands, will make other products in the industry. And then you have Sony that goes beyond that, and they make a number of different products that are not related to photography at all, right? So when we look at Fujifilm, April 2024, their stock had jumped tremendously. They went from a $2 stock for over a year to over $11 a share. That's phenomenal. Imagine if you would have been, a Fuji Ultra fanboy and you bought into their stock just before they jumped like that. That'd have been a nice little, investment. When we go to Nikon, as of April of 2024, at that time, Nikon was $10 and change per share. So that meant Fuji was above Nikon. That's interesting. But when you look at Nikon's history, their stock has been up and down kind of in the 8 to 11 range for over a year. So, but kudos to them. When you look at Sony, or Canon, I should say, same time frame, they are looking at $29 plus a share. And then to round it off with basically going from Fuji to Sony. Sony, again, they make more than just camera gear, was sitting at $86 plus a share, April of 2024. So let me get a quick sip here. So are you an Ultra fanboy? Do you own stock for your brand? Is it a smart investment based on where the stock is? How big of a fanboy are you? As I'm choking here laughing. But when you seriously look at it, I have to honestly say, at least for me being a Fuji shooter and a Nikon shooter, I'm actually impressed about Fuji. And I actually said to myself, boy, it would have been interesting if I'd have bought stock in Fuji before they had the jump they had from roughly $2 a share up to over $11 a share. That's impressive. With that, guys, that's the podcast for this session. I'll see you guys on the next cast.